All right, everyone, in this video, step 4 of 6 steps to 6 figures with Shopify, we are now going to start looking at testing products with Facebook ads, okay? And this is actually, I have a fairly straightforward process that is working with CBO. I've been teaching this to people. People have been getting a lot of value from it and really understanding how CBO works. So I want to cover just like some different aspects here, from how I set my ads up in the testing phase to the strategy and to overall just like what makes this whole process work, okay? So first of all, I'm going to talk about the campaigns that I use. These are the two types of campaigns I use in e-commerce. The engagement campaign, which the purpose for the engagement campaign, when you have an ad, once you have an ad that you want to run, the purpose is because engagement equals social proof, and so it helps you get like a jump start on your campaign. And also, engagement campaigns overall bring down the cost of the ad, okay? And when I say bring down the cost of the ad, I mean on the conversion campaign, because you're going to use the same post ID. All right, so you use the same post ID from the conversion campaign and the engagement campaign. And the way, people always talk about how do I get lower CPM, lower cost on my ads. The way you get lower cost is by engagement. So when you run an engagement campaign next to a conversion campaign, you are going to also naturally bring down the overall cost of the conversion campaign, okay? Now, I always target right for purchase on conversion campaigns. I mean, lead objective if you're trying to run leads, but for the most part, it's just always purchase, all right? It's not to say you can't try different objectives if you're not having luck with purchase, but I always just go straight for purchase. I don't really see much of a need in going after anything else. So campaign budget optimization, mandatory as of February 2020 from the reports that are out, but it doesn't need to affect the testing strategy, okay? So you can control how many ad sets you want to put in a CBO. You can also set minimum ad set spend levels to have control. So if you want to test with one ad set, or for example, if you want to, like when I want to run an engagement campaign on an ad just to get some engagement on it, I'm just running a simple engagement CBO with one ad set, $5 budget, right? I'm not like launching a whole bunch of ad sets and spending a whole bunch of money on the engagement campaign. I'm just running that one. And so I'm going to draw this out for you, but that's basically the idea, right? Is that you can have as much control still within this at the ad set level. CBO just means that you're setting your budget at the campaign level, and that Facebook is going to do its best to automate your budget based on however many ad sets you have and the budget that you have towards what's working and what's not working, and not towards what's not working. Okay, so here are my testing parameters, right? And when I say testing parameters, what I mean is when you are coming in to create an ad, a campaign, right? Overall, you need to create a campaign. So when you're coming in here to create a campaign and you're selecting your objective, these are the two objectives I use, engagement and conversion. But I never start with engagement, right? I'll show you when the engagement comes in. I start by using conversions to test, okay? Right now, this is why it's optional. You have to either switch it on or off. Eventually, this won't be there. Everybody will have to just set your budget at the campaign level right here. But you might as well start using it now and getting used to it, because it actually still works really well. And the way that these campaigns run, it can actually create a very automated way to run your ads when you're scaling. So I like CBO, okay? And I also got to give credit to Depesh Mandalia. He wrote the CBO cookbook, and I've learned a lot from there, right? So I learned from that book, and then I just kind of picked and choose what I wanted to use and made it work for me, which is what you should do as well. Facebook ads is different for everybody. So anyway, let's get started here. So I would name this campaign whatever it is, right? Test conversions, okay? And then daily budget. Usually I'm starting out at a $50 daily budget. And my overall, I'm jumping ahead here for a second, but my overall testing strategy is to usually test like 5 different ad sets, $10 per ad set. You could set your budget to whatever you want, but for now, let's just say $50, and I'll come back and talk more about that later. in your ad set is where you set your parameters of like how you want to target your audience, control your budget, and different things, where your conversion event's going to be. So I would optimize for purchase, right? Now, if it says red, it's just because it's an account that hasn't been used before, right? Like this one that I'm using as just an example account. Okay, so it doesn't matter that it says red. Facebook still knows how to optimize for a purchase, even though you have no purchase events yet, and it will still go out and look for people that are most likely to purchase, and then as soon as it gets that first one, right, assuming it's a good product, as soon as it gets that first one, it'll continue to use that data to then optimize and continue to optimize based on the data it's receiving. Okay, obviously this is pretty straightforward here. You can target locations, you can exclude people in certain locations if you want to. Age demographic, if you're, I generally only start at least at 21, but if you have like an age demographic very specific to your product or a gender very specific to your product. If I'm targeting worldwide, I always select English as a language in here. If you're just targeting the US, it doesn't matter. But if I am targeting worldwide, I would narrow down to the English all language. I like to uncheck this because in the testing phase, I don't find it relevant, right? I just want to test based on my own targeting that I give in here. We'll talk about audiences in a second. Placements, okay? So again, I'm just talking about testing parameters, stuff that I set up the same way every single time, okay? There are different opinions on placements out there. Some people say just test auto placements, okay? Facebook says it recommends to test auto placements. For me, that doesn't make sense, all right? Number one, audience network I've never found any value in the audience network. Number two, in the testing phase, I'm not testing people in Messenger. Messenger can be something in the retargeting phase. Like in retargeting, I do automatic placements because then Facebook can just follow people around the web wherever it wants to and show them my ads wherever it wants to. But in the testing phase, I'm being specific about where I want to show my ads. Showing somebody an ad in the Messenger, like for the first experience they have with your product or your brand is, to me, it's a little weird, right? So I remove Messenger as well. Facebook and Instagram is a situational condition, right? Optional, okay? So first of all, for Facebook, like I said, I removed the right column as well. I don't find much value in the right column as a testing phase. I just really want to target in the feed for both Facebook and Instagram. I removed stories too. Stories is something I would test. If I have a winning product, I would get stories made later specifically because the story format is full screen vertical. And generally I'm testing in the feed format, which is the 1x1 square, right? So that's, stories are something that I would generally test in a separate campaign with a separate ad creative that's been designed specifically for the story format. Now, talking about the rest of these things, everything else is fine, okay? This is how I set it. The only difference is, do I use both Facebook and Instagram? Usually I will test them separately, okay? A lot of times, so Facebook and Instagram have different audiences as well, in my opinion. Instagram, 80% of Instagram users are ages 18 to 35. All right, so not all products are going to appeal to an Instagram audience, okay? If I do have a product that I believe appeals to the Instagram audience, I will generally still test it separately because if I know that there's a large audience on Instagram, then I want to, I'm going to test it separately than Facebook because I want to know the data. Like obviously Facebook will report that data within your columns and you can see which placement did better. But for me, it just makes more sense to test them separately with their own budget, right? Just my opinion, okay? It's not the only one, and I'm not saying it's the only right one, but it is one that works, okay? And that's why I like to do it that way. So, looking at Instagram as well, it kind of depends on if there's even an audience there. So, for example, if I type in married as a relationship status audience, okay? This is something I might test for a jewelry product, okay? So then I come down to Instagram. If I remove Instagram, I see there's not much of a difference in the audience, right? It went from 57 million to 56 million people. So honestly, there's not even really much of a point in testing Instagram. The large part of the audience is on Facebook, okay? But if I go in here and let's say instead of married, I type in the interest, marriage. $21 million people when it's just set to Facebook. If I option Instagram as well, I see 35 million people. So there's a big difference there, right? There's 14 million people on Instagram that are categorized for this audience. So in that situation, I would test Instagram separately, right? Because it's a big enough audience on its own, right? Where if I remove Facebook, Instagram is still a big enough audience on its own to test on its own, okay? So that's the way I deal with Facebook and Instagram when I'm coming in here and looking at my audiences and deciding what to test, but very rarely will I test them together because I find more value in testing them separately, and I'm only really testing Instagram separately if I notice that it has a large enough audience size to make it worth it, okay? So that's my overall parameters. Oh, and then down here as well, right? So I would keep this optimized for conversions. I keep this on 7-day click, 1-day view. The reason being, this is your conversion window, right? So it just tells you the amount of time it typically takes for somebody to complete the conversion based on after clicking or viewing your ad. So the reason I have it set for 7 days after clicking or 1 day after viewing is basically just like giving yourself the biggest conversion window. That's why I like it in the testing phase, because it means that if even after 7 days after clicking the ad, if somebody goes back and purchases, then Facebook will attribute that data to this ad set and still add that in as a conversion event to use in its optimization for this ad set, right? So that's why I like using it that way. Okay. So then if you look at this, okay. So let's see here. Where were we? Lowest cost bidding, right? 5 ad sets, $50 CBO. So I generally like to test 5 different audiences, 3 to 5, like 3 at the minimum if there's not enough audiences, but 5 ideally if there is enough audiences, okay? And so each audience would just be a general size interest like this. So if I was selling a product that had to deal with married couples, right, this would be my audience, marriage, 21 plus. Okay. If it was just men, I would write 21 plus men, right? And I would just select men, or you get the idea. So that's how I structure my ad set. Okay. And then that's it basically, right? And your ad is where I'm not going to go into this because this is simple, right? We already talked about how you create an ad. This is just where you do it, and it's very simple and straightforward to do, so there's no reason. But the ad set right now and talking about how to set up the testing, that's what we're covering. So that's how I would do that, okay? Now, moving into actually what the testing strategy becomes, okay? Because we're going to be creating multiple ad sets, and then within that we'll have different ads. So we have these multiple ad sets, and the idea is split testing ads. And the reason behind this strategy is because we want to identify 2 things. Right? There's 2 main variables in your ad. There's your ad, this should say ad creative, right? There's your ad creative, and then there's your audience. All right. These are your 2 main variables. All other things being the same. Your testing. That's why the testing parameters are the testing parameters. They're generally always the same for me. They don't change. They don't affect. They affect the overall goal, but they don't affect the performance. The performance is based on your ad creative and your audience, and more importantly, which ones you're looking for winning combinations, right? So that's why you want to test multiple ad creatives and multiple audiences within each other to find winning combinations that you can then scale, right? The way that a CBO works, and the reason that a lot of people don't get it right, and Depeche talks about this, is that a CBO works on having good something good to automate, right? And so you want to scale when you already know what's working. So you have to go through this testing phase to identify what's working by testing some different audiences and ad creatives, and then moving that into a higher budget CBO campaign, which we'll talk about in the scaling strategy. So here's my split testing idea, okay? Now, you could actually take this to a much deeper level, right? I consider this the minimum level for getting started in testing, is having 5 different ad sets, 2 ad creatives per ad set, okay? Now, I'm still only spending $10 per ad set, all right? And when I'm doing this, I'm setting a minimum. Did I talk about this already? I'm setting a minimum spend per ad set. Okay, so let me just make sure that I cover this, right? Because what I'm going to do is have each ad set, right? So the campaign budget is set for $50, right? So the CBO is set at $50, right? And I want that distributed evenly across 5 different ones. So ideally, each one of these ad sets is spending $10, okay? But it doesn't need to be 10 exactly. I just want to make sure that I have a way of setting a minimum spend in the beginning so that Facebook actually gives each ad set a chance, right? Because the way a CBO works is that it's going to usually spend more towards one. Like Facebook is going to identify an ad set it thinks it's working best and want to push more budget into that ad set based on its thinking that this one is working best. So before Facebook jumps to conclusions and maybe gets a false positive, I set a minimum ad set spend to make sure that that money is being distributed somewhat evenly. Okay, so the way that we do this, and this is a formula I got from Depeche, is taking the total budget, okay, and then you are dividing it by the number of ad sets, okay. So you take the total budget divided by the number of ad sets, and then you divide that whole thing by 2, okay? And so in this case, we have $50 budget divided by 5 ad sets, so that equals 10, divided by 2 would equal a $5 minimum, right? And it would be like this for any budget. If it was a $500 budget and 5 ad sets, then it would be $100 per ad set, divided by 2 would be $50. Okay, so where you set that in your ad set is down here at the bottom. All right, you set it down here at the bottom. Add spend limits to this ad set. Okay, and I set the minimum here at $5. All right, that way it doesn't exactly guarantee it'll spend exactly 5, but it will at least make sure in the beginning that Facebook is spending money evenly before it tries to decide where to start pushing more of the traffic, okay? Now, this is pretty straightforward. The way that you test your ad creative could be that maybe you have a photo and a video. Maybe you have the same video with 2 different thumbnails. Maybe you have the same photo with 2 different ad copies. And again, you could break this out even deeper. Like some media agencies, when they're working with a brand that has like one specific product they're selling, right, and only one product, they will come up with like 4 ad creatives per ad set in the beginning, because that's where you really want to gather your data and test things. You really want to be testing a lot of things so you know what to move into the scaling phase. The problem with most people when they try to get into the CBO scaling, like I already said, is they haven't put enough money in the testing to know what's really going to work. And so they try to scale a combination that may not really be a winning combination, and then it dies out quick, or their performance is all over the place, right? And so this is a way, the more ad creatives you're testing within these different ad sets, you can identify the winning combinations. And it may not be that it's the same for every one. Maybe this one performs best for this ad set, this one performs best for this ad set. Maybe this ad set, nothing works, right? And so you just don't do anything with this one at all. Maybe with this ad set, that, you know what I'm saying? So you're looking for winning combinations in no particular order or meaning. You just want to find what is working, because then we're going to talk about what you do when you move to the scaling phase. Basically, you're going to take that winning combination. So like if this ad set and this ad creative works, we're going to take that winning combination and move it into its own CBO campaign so we can start to scale it, right? And we're going to create an engagement campaign once we have that part that works, okay? So we're split testing for the outcome. We're trying to identify the best combinations so that we can then create a new CBO campaign with those winning combinations. And we'll set that new campaign for a bigger budget to start actually pushing conversions, okay? Now, in the testing phase, here's the metrics that I like to watch, all right? CPM is your cost per impressions, okay? Your CPC is your cost per link click. ATC, your cost per add to cart. Of course, your cost per purchase and your return on ad spend. So these all matter together, but in different variations, all right? CPM, first of all, is a secondary, and listen, there's more stuff that you can test. I'm not trying to be super over technical here. I'm trying to give you exactly what you need at a beginner level to make money, okay, and to save money really too in the testing phase. So the CPM is, you know, this is how you get charged on Facebook, right? You're charged by impressions. And so the higher your CPM, the more difficult it is to advertise. But generally the way to get lower CPMs is just to have more ad creatives. Like if you have a really good ad creative for your audience, then you'll see good CPMs on it, right? Because people will be engaging with it. So I'm not going to talk too much about this because CPM does matter. It's better. I like to see CPMs under $30 if I'm targeting like top tier countries like the US. If you're targeting worldwide or lower tier countries, your CPM should be under $10 for sure, maybe even under $5. But your overall here, this is just kind of a secondary metric, because what matters most is your CPC. These ones, right? Like these ones matter more. You could have, I've seen before where I've had CPMs that were higher, like $45, say, for a CPM, and yet I was still getting cost per purchase at my target acquisition cost, right? So even though technically I'm reaching less people for my money, I'm still profitable on my ad spend, so I can still just continue to scale. Does that make sense? So for me, obviously you want to lower CPM, but it's kind of a secondary thing. CPC, so this is what you're really going to look at first, okay? Because when you're looking at your CPC, I didn't want to do that. Okay, so when you are looking at your let's just get rid of this. Okay. Okay. So when you have an ad set running, right, the ideal line is obviously that you want to get purchases, okay? But it doesn't start out that way. And so two of the main events that I'm looking for in the beginning is the CPC, which is the cost per click, okay? And this is just a way of measuring how many people are actually clicking, because engagement is great, and if your CPMs are low and all that stuff is great, but if people aren't actually clicking on your ad, then it's not showing any buying interest, right? And so you want to make sure you have CPC. What I generally like to see, okay? This is, again, there's so many variables in something like this because it all depends on what you're advertising, right? For example, a high ticket product that maybe is, say, you know, I don't know, let's just say $300 or more, and has a margin of, say, $100 or more, you can afford a lot higher CPC, right? Overall, your CPC should be in balance with your EPC, okay? So your cost per click and your earnings per click. meaning that as long as this number is lower than this number, then I'm profitable and I can continue buying more clicks. All right, so it's something that you have to kind of take with a grain of salt. A lot of you probably aren't selling high-ticket products, but if you are, then you want to think about this, because if you're selling high-ticket products, this is why people on Google, for example, can bid, $10 per keyword per click, right? Because maybe they have a product where they have a really high profit margin, so they know that even if it's costing them $10 per click, their earnings per click is $20, right? So you figure out your earnings per click like this. You look at total sales divided by total visitors for a day, or whatever time period you want to put it in. Total visitors. All right, so let's say you are making let's say you do $2,000 in sales on 1,000 visitors. That's a bad 1,000. Anyway, that would mean that your earnings per click is $2. Okay. So if my CPC on average on my when I'm clicking on my ads, if I'm getting an average CPC of 75 cents, let's say, that means for every visitor that I get, I'm spending 75 cents, but I'm making $2, right? So then at that point, I know as long as I can keep buying visitors for 75 cents, just keep pushing them in to my store, to my product page, to my funnel, and I'm going to keep being profitable, right? So, or maybe, because this doesn't, there's variables, right? This doesn't include your cost per goods. But basically, I'm just trying to explain the overall concept of buying traffic and CPC here, okay? So now moving on, moving back into this, the other thing that matters is your lifetime value. Okay, we're not going to get too deep into this because this is a somewhat advanced concept, but you might know as you've been running a store longer, your lifetime value of your customers, like maybe you get a customer and on the first time they spend $20 with you, but over the next 3 months, because of emails and upsells and retargeting, they end up spending $60 with you, right? Then you know your lifetime customer is worth more, so you can spend more based on what they're worth over time. This is how all big brands like Amazon, Nike, and different people know how much they can acquire a customer for. They can spend more to acquire more. Okay? In general, let's get down to the practical level, right? In general, when you're running products that are in the range of, like, let's say $20 to $100, which is really the drop ship print on demand world by and large, okay? That was terrible. That's what you're advertising, right? $100, $20 type product. Where I like to see my CPC is anywhere from $0 to, say, $2. Okay? Generally, really good CPC is $1 and under. All right, that's really good. But I've also run products with, say, a product in like the $50 range with a decent margin, where I know that my margin on my product is, say, $30, and I'm profitable here at a $2 CPC because I'm getting, I'm getting a good conversion rate on my store. All right. So keep all of this stuff in mind as you're testing products, right? In the beginning, basically, you just want to make sure you're getting clicks. And for the most part, if you are running ads on Facebook with like products in this range, you should probably be looking for clicks around the dollar range or under as an indication that your ad is working. Okay. Now, another caveat to this is if you're running worldwide, or if you are running into third world countries like India, the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, you're going to see much lower CPC. You're going to see clicks probably under 10 cents because it's super easy to get traffic. Not many people are advertising there, so traffic's a lot cheaper. So you'll see much cheaper CPC, but that's natural. It doesn't mean you're going to get more sales necessarily because traffic is just naturally cheaper, right? But you should be looking at that in the testing phase, right? In the first day or two when you are running your ad, right? So this is like day 1 right here. okay, on my scale, day 1, day 2, okay? In that first testing phase, you should be seeing clicks happening when you're spending, your first $5. You should be getting at least a couple clicks. If you get the $5 spent and you have no clicks, turn that ad set off. It's not working, okay? Now, add to cart is the next phase that you need to understand, because when it comes to your add to cart, the thing that you need to be aware of is once people are getting clicks, right, the next stage is you want them to be clicking that add to cart button, showing more buying intent, getting them closer to the overall goal of a purchase, okay? So if you are starting to see a lot of clicks over here, but you're not seeing any add to carts here, then that becomes problematic. Because it could mean two things. I mean, it could mean multiple things. It could mean that your price is too high on the product. It could mean you have a really bad product page. Mean your product description is not good enough. Could mean something's broken, right? But no matter what, you need to start looking at your page here. If you're getting good clicks, right? The ad's only job is to get the click. So if you're getting good clicks on here, but then it's not working out here, then you have to think about what is that issue. Generally, I like to think of add to cart in terms of half of my margin or lower, okay? And what I mean by that is, let's take this example here. If I'm selling a $50 product and I know my margin is on that after cost of goods and shipping, right? So after cost of goods and shipping on my $50 product, I know I have $30 margin for marketing and profit, okay? So in that situation, you always want to figure this number out. You always want to take your price and then subtract your cost of goods before you start advertising, because this kind of gives you your margin, and then from there you need to think about your target acquisition cost, okay? And this is why it's hard to advertise products with low margin unless you understand your LTV or unless you have good upsells in place, right? Because the other thing that matters here is your AOV, meaning your average order value. So if you have upsells to bump things up. And I'm not trying to get too technical, but I'm just trying to highlight some of the things here that it all goes into testing your ads, right? It's not as simple a concept as some people think. So I need you to understand all of this. So once you take your price minus your cost of goods sold, you have a margin left, and that's your marketing margin and your profit margin. So in this case, if my price is $50 and my COGS are $20, then I have a margin of $30 to market and to leave me a profit. So for me, I like to think of my ATC as half of my margin, okay? Now, that's a very general way to say it. Like, you have to think about what your profit margin needs to be in order for you to make money and make that as a scalable campaign. That's different when you're running a brand compared to when you're just like a solo dropshipper trying to make some side hustle money or get a business started. At this point, your margin on a $30 margin could really be anything up to $25 customer cost per acquisition, because even then you're still making $5. That's not a great profit margin, but you're still making money, right? You're still making profit. So there's no reason not to run the ad. But what I like, that would be like my top line, my top line limit on acquiring a customer maybe is $25 if I have a $30 margin. But my ATC, I know that there's always going to be a drop off from add to cart to purchase, right? So I need to account for that drop off. So ideally, I'm thinking somewhere in the range of half of whatever my customer acquisition cost is that I should be seeing add to carts. So in this case, by the time I'm getting to, let's say, around $12 in ad spend, I want to see add to carts. If I'm not seeing add to carts, then there's a problem. Now, if I'm seeing like if the clicks, for example, are not great, like I've spent $12 and say I've only had like 6 clicks, $2 per click. It's really not that great. I might just turn the ad set off. I'll spend probably like to $15, $20, and if I have no add to carts, turn it off. But if I'm seeing a lot of clicks here, if I've spent, say, $12 to $15, and these are just like general numbers, you got to apply it to what you're doing and what your risk tolerance is. but you have to give your ad set time to spend, right? So you're at least generally going to have to spend at least this much money to start seeing some results and some data per ad set. But this is how I'm figuring out where I should start to be getting add to carts, because I'm trying to figure out constantly, am I letting this ad continuing to run and spend more money, or should I be turning it off? Okay, so and this is why you test quality over quantity, by the way, too, because the more quality you test, the more you're likely to see good clicks and good add to cart, So anyway, when I'm here, right, if I spent $12 to $15 and I'm seeing great clicks, like let's say I'm seeing 50% CPC, right, people are really clicking and showing interest in this, but I've had no add to carts, then that's an indication there's a problem somewhere on my product page. And that could be multiple things. It could, like I said, you have to test and analyze, and we've talked about a lot of things, and I'm still going to talk about more of it in the next video, of what you can look at in your funnel that might be broken about why your people aren't going to the next stage. But in a perfect world with an optimized funnel, these are the numbers that I'm looking at, right? And then finally, cost per purchase. Okay, you have your margin, your target acquisition cost is kind of where you want to use as your frame for when something should be getting a purchase. All right, so if you've been getting good CPC and good ATC, right, good add to carts and clicks, and then, around the time you're getting the $25, $30 spent, you want to see that first purchase come in, okay? Ideally, even sooner than that, right? But I'm just saying, as my benchmarks, because you need to kind of have a benchmark of when to turn something off or when to realize something's not working and need to be fixed. And so these are looking at those benchmark kind of numbers to be able to do that, okay? And return on ad spend. So finally, you want it to be at a profitable return, okay? Return on ad spend is not really, again, it's kind of a secondary metric. It's good to look at, okay? Because having an idea of your break-even return on ad spend is something good to know. But basically, so let's put it like that. You want to have an idea of your break-even return on ad spend, which has to do with your margin and knowing how much you're making per sale, right? So if you know that you're making, if you're making 10, because it has to do with your target acquisition cost and your, here, let me pull this up on a different thing. Okay, so a way to think about this, let me clean some of this up here, okay? A way to think about this with a break-even ROAS is you need to know your COGS, right? Cost of goods sold. And then your sale price. Okay? Which will give you your margin. Okay, so let's say you're selling a $30 item, okay, and your COGS on that item are $10. That's your cost of goods plus shipping, whatever it costs you to fulfill it. That means your margin is 20. Okay, so your break-even ROAS is going to equal your sale price divided by your margin. Okay, that's the formula. So in this case, 30 divided by 20, which would be, that's simple, right? So it would be 30 divided by 20, which is going to equal 1.5. Okay, so what that lets you know basically is when you do get a sale and you start looking at what is the return on ad spend, your ROAS, are you at a break-even point or not? And so it's good. It's good to understand this because then you can kind of understand the context of your ROAS a little bit when you're looking at your ads in your ads manager and you start getting sales. Am I getting it at a profitable spend, or is this not profitable for me? And some good guidelines on that are if your break-even range is 1.5, is less than 1.5, then it's great. If your ROAS range is too high, meaning to break even, for example, if to break, and this has to do a lot with your sale price versus your cost of goods just as much as your ad spend. But basically, the higher this number is, your break even ROAS, means the higher, the harder it's going to be profitable, right? So anything that's low, right? Anything that's a low number, like 1.5 or even under, if it's a low break-even ROAS, like you only need to make 1.5 times your money back to be to break even, then that's great, because that means if you're at a 2 times ROAS to 3 times ROAS on front-end traffic, you're making a profit. Which is a good range for Facebook ads, and especially on front end traffic, getting higher than that can be very difficult, right? So there's a lot of concepts when it comes to ROAS, so I don't want to try to be too complicated here, talking about scaling and blended ROAS and stuff with retargeting, but I'm talking about like really trying to make front end testing traffic work for you, okay, and understanding these different metrics and how you use them and look at them. But mostly, mostly what really matters is once you get that cost per purchase, like just is it coming in at a profitable, rate? Because ideally, before you scale, you're going to be testing something. So say I'm testing and I start getting a cost per purchase at $20, right? I get my first sale at $20, and I need to know, like, is this profitable for me? Very simple to figure out if you're just selling one product. You're looking at, again, your cost of goods. So you're looking at your sale price, like in that example of something earlier, $50 sale price minus a $20 cost of goods fulfillment price equals a $30 margin. Okay, so I know that if I'm acquiring customers at $20, that I'm profitable, right? If I don't get a sale until $30, I'm not profitable. All right, and if you're getting really good numbers, you might keep it running a little bit longer, because then if you get a sale, if you get your second sale at $35 spent, now you just drop down to a $17 cost per purchase. Right, so again, this is just like some general information on testing, understanding your metrics, how to look at it. But like I said, if you want it in the beginning, or the formula I'm looking at CPC first, right? Within the first $5 to $10 spent, I'm trying to see at least a CPC of like $1 or somewhere in that range, okay? And then the next thing I'm looking at is ATC, okay? By the time I've spent my $15 to $20, I want to see some add to carts, okay? At least 1 or 2 add to carts, hopefully more than that. And I like my range of what my cost per add to cart is usually about half of my target CPC, right? My target CPC, cost per purchase, okay? And then of course, finally, when you get to your cost per purchase, when you finally make a sale, is it coming in at a profitable point? And then what I'm doing is for every ad set, right? Anyway, for every ad set that I run, right? There's multiple ad sets in that testing phase. You're going to turn off the ones that aren't working, and ideally, right, you have 2 ad set or 2 ads maybe that you're testing, or maybe you have multiple creatives in each one, but maybe one of them is working, because you'll look at these numbers at the ad level, right? You're going to look at it at the ad level and compare both of them and look at the CPC they're getting and the ATC they're getting, and eventually the cost per purchase if they're getting it. And Facebook is going to naturally, in 95% of the time, gravitate towards one. One of them is going to work better than the other. And you might see that early on. It might be this one's getting great clicks and this one's not, and so you turn this one off, right? Or it might be that both start out getting clicks, but then this one is the only one that gets a purchase, right? And so then you turn this one off. But eventually what I'm doing is I'm going to let this run, usually in the testing phase, for like 4 to 5 days. and I want to see at least 3 purchases in the profitable return, right? Profitable ROAS, profitable cost per purchase, before I think about scaling that. Before I think about scaling that particular ad set. Okay, so that is go up here. So when you're thinking about those 5 different ad sets that you have, and each one of them, right, marketing to 2 different ad creatives, okay, each one I'm looking for one that's working. I'm not looking for both of them to work. I'm trying to test to find the winning combination. So if this one doesn't work, then I know this one's the winning combination. That's what I'll be taking in the scaling phase later. And I'm looking at for each one. Maybe this ad set doesn't work at all with either of the creatives, but then maybe this one works with this. So this is wrong. So then that makes this my winning combination right here. And then maybe this one works with this as well. So now this is my winning ad creation, and maybe this one doesn't work. So now if these have all been getting like at least 3 purchases consistently over a 4 to 5 day period, then that is a significant, and it's profitable, then that's the indicator for me that I can now take that into the scaling part 1 phase, right? There's multiple steps to scaling. This is just scaling 1, where basically I'm isolating that winning combination into its own CBO campaign. Okay, so that is the testing, all right? And I know that I jumped around a little bit from different things here and there, but there's really a lot that goes into understanding your numbers and understanding this at a level that you can be successful with it, okay? So I hope that was super valuable. Watch it again if you need to, or certain parts if you need to. And in the next video, so instead of like you might think the next video might jump immediately to scaling 1, the next video is actually about optimizing your store, because one of the things that you'll see, and I'll talk about this in the next video, is that situation where maybe you're getting good clicks, but you're not getting good ATC, or you're not getting a good conversion rate of sales on your store. And that is a funnel problem, right? Not an ad problem. The ad's only job is to get the clicks. So in the testing phase, those are the metrics you need to understand, and we've walked through all the way up to that point. But before we can really talk about scaling, we need to talk about optimizing your store to make sure it's set up in a way that the traffic is converting. Otherwise, the money that you could be spending could just be wasted anyway. All right? So that's what we're going to talk about next in the next video.